titans, technocrats, and young changemakers gather to tackle global challenges. Pressing issues like climate change, geopolitical risks, cost of living crisis, and a slowing economy are at the top of the agenda for the global elite this year. Watch comprehensive coverage of Davos 2024 on WION World is One.
Vielleicht nur als 5%.
Hi everyone, welcome to WION Live Broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani. First, a look at this hour's headlines. Pakistan recalls its ambassador from Iran and blocks Tehran's envoy from returning to Islamabad after an Iranian airstrike killed 2 children in the west of the country. A day earlier, Iran justifies airstrikes on militant targets. Russia's foreign ministry says that it expects President Vladimir Putin and his Iranian counterpart to soon sign a new interstate treaty, which is in the final stages of being agreed. Ukraine claims Western companies supplied $2.9 billion worth of components to Russia for military production in 2023, despite sanctions on Moscow. This is according to a research finding by the Kyiv School of Economics. All right, let's start you off here in the United States, where the presidential election has officially kicked off. The party nomination race for U.S. presidential election has now moved to the U.S. state of New Hampshire after a historic win in Iowa for U.S. former President Donald Trump. The New Hampshire primary is set to take place on the 23rd of January. It may be the best and last opportunity for former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley to emerge as an alternative to Donald Trump. The victory in Iowa cemented Trump's frontrunner status. Haley failed to secure even the second place as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis got 21% of the vote. Nikki Haley had clarified earlier that she's not interested in the vice president's post. In New Hampshire, Haley has spent a lot of time campaigning. Haley has also got crucial support from New Hampshire's Republican Governor Chris Sununu. Recent polls show a much closer race in the state, but not between Trump and Haley, but between DeSantis and Haley. Frontrunner Donald Trump, meanwhile, continues to use every opportunity to attack Haley, calling her everything from pro-China to pro-terrorist.
But people behind Nikki Haley are pro-amnesty, they're pro-China, they're pro-open borders. These are the people that are backing her. They're pro-war. We don't want war. We got out of all the wars. We beat the hell out of ISIS. They're pro-Biden, frankly. And if she wins, Biden wins. And if Biden wins, New Hampshire cannot win. You're going to lose, and bad things happen.
And a snapshot of what is to come next year, fresh off A campaign victory in Iowa, former President Donald Trump sat in a New York courtroom to defend himself in a defamation trial. The trial stems from a columnist, E. Jean Carroll, claiming that Trump defamed her in 2019 while he was the president of the United States after she accused him of sexually attacking her decades ago. The 80-year-old columnist is seeking more than $10 million in damages in the civil trial. A jury will be determined and will determine how much Trump owes Carroll for mocking her when he was president. In response to Carroll's defamation case against Trump, the former U.S. president says that Carroll has made up her claims to sell a book.
And then I'm going to go back to New York tonight, and then I'm going to go to one of these phony cases tonight where we have tomorrow morning early, nice and early.
Well, the trial is different from a civil case last year where another New York jury found Trump liable for sexually assaulting Carroll in a department store dressing room back in 1996 and subsequently defaming her in 2022 when he called her a complete con job. This is when the jury awarded Carroll $5 million in damages. However, this is only one of the many trials swirling over Trump's head. The former president has been indicted in 4 criminal cases and facing 91 counts, including allegations of attempting to undermine the 2020 presidential election.
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate you being at this incredible evening, Mar-a-Lago, and we love you, and we love this place.
Israel and Gaza have reached a new deal to allow delivery of medicines to hostages in Gaza and more humanitarian aid to the besieged Strip. This after mediation efforts by Qatar and France. According to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, the aid will be forwarded by Qatari representatives to the Israeli hostages. France says the medical aid is for 45 hostages and will arrive at a hospital in Rafah. From there, members of the International Committee of the Red Cross will divide it into batches, which will be immediately transferred to the hostages. Earlier today, loaded trucks entered Gaza through the Rafah border. The 2.3 million population of Gaza faces a dire humanitarian crisis, facing scarcity of food, fuel, and medical supplies. Long queues for bread and water are now common sights in Gaza. In Rafah, several people wait for hours to get basic necessities, with many describing the assault on Gaza as psychological warfare.
After 101 days, today the war is psychological. A war of fear, a war on food, a war on clean water, and high prices. If you want to buy a pack of bread today, you need to stand in a queue for 4 to 5 hours. If you want to fill up water, you would need another 4 to 5 hours. You would need to walk for long distances to get water from tanks.
Meanwhile, in Davos, the UN chief reiterated his call for a ceasefire in Gaza, stressing that the parties involved in the conflict are ignoring international law.
We see an epidemic of impunity around the world. I repeat my call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza and a process that leads to sustained peace for Israelis and Palestinians based on a two-state solution. That is the only way to stem the suffering and prevent a spillover that could send the entire region up in flames.
Business and political leaders, including U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, described the conflict in Gaza as gut-wrenching.
Ladies and gentlemen, the other things
but the choice is there. And ultimately, this is about choices. What kind of society do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of region do we want to live in? We talk a lot as well today about regionalization. There's a profound opportunity for regionalization in the Middle East, in the greater Middle East, that we have not had before.
Ladies and gentlemen.
All right. For more on all of this, our correspondent Jody Cohen is joining us live from Renana, and Mr. Nathan Paul Southern, a security expert, is joining us live from Bujumbura, Burundi. And thank you both for joining us. Let's start with you, Jody. Great to see you. What can you tell us about the latest on the deal to get medicine to some of the hostages? Finally, some good news. And also on the talks of possibly a further hostage release deal?
Hi, Susan. Yes, so Qatar has said that their planes carrying the medicines for the hostages have arrived in Egypt. Hamas has said that for every 1,000 aid packages entering Gaza, a medicine package will be sent to a hostage. Now, this is the first time in more than 3 months that the hostages will have received medicine. There's particular concern for the elderly hostages and also those injured by Hamas in the 7th of October massacre and since. There's also skepticism, I have to say, about this deal. For example, people are questioning how will Israel know that the aid is getting to the hostages, even if there's video evidence showing the hostages receiving it. What's to say that in a day or two that's not taken away? And there's also been criticism of the government because the trucks are going to be allowed into Gaza without having been inspected. And some commentators are asking if potentially they could hide supplies that could be used by Hamas, such as oxygen, to keep the Hamas fighters in the tunnels for longer. Now, in terms of the remaining hostages, we know that there's more than 130 hostages still being held captive in Gaza. We're hearing about talks on a potential hostage release deal continuing. We know that the US, Qatar and Israel are all having discussions on the issues at Davos. The chair of Israel's Parliamentary Committee on Women has also criticised international women's organisations at Davos for what she has said is their deafening silence on Hamas's sex crimes. And we've heard from some of the released hostages talking about the sexual abuse and torture going on inside Hamas's tunnels. Some have said that they even expect some of the hostages to now be pregnant at the hands of Hamas. So there's huge anguish amongst the families and concern for another deal to happen as quickly as possible.
Oh my goodness. Mr. Southern, we're talking about a deal that's coming across. Some are saying that it's an effort to soften blows. Are we coming around to understand that this may be an easing of mayhem against civilians in Gaza and perhaps against these hostages?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't go as far to say that this is really an easing of tensions or even an attempt by the Israeli state to look like that. I think that Israel is in a really difficult situation right now with the accusations of genocide leveled against them by the South African government and the US government now taking a stronger stance and saying that simply the civilian death toll is too high, something needs to be done. Israel has launched this enormous bombardment on Gaza, with the majority of those 24,000 people being killed being civilians. And that does begin to go back to the domestic polling as well. And the Israeli state needs to keep that in mind. They're beginning to be seen by many states, many international organizations around the world as a bit of a pariah state that is committing clear war crimes, clear violations of international humanitarian law. And I think the Israeli state here is understanding that if they do not get the medicines to their hostages, if they lose even more of them, if after all of this bombardment they're not even able to save the people that this entire campaign has been waged to protect, then the Israeli government's really going to struggle to justify this conflict at home. Now, Hamas benefits from this too, because Hamas has a similar problem. If Hamas isn't able to get aid into the Gaza Strip, then they are not looking after what are supposed to be their people either. They both need this reprieve so that they can continue some form of local support so that both sides can continue waging war, which unfortunately I do not see any end to or any easing of tensions in the near future.
And the notion that if Hamas releases these hostages, a lot of this could be prevented. What are your thoughts on that? a lot of the burden right now lies on Hamas for making its citizens and the suffering of these hostages. You know, as our correspondent Jody was just mentioning, the sexual abuse that's going on under these tunnels and the aid that's not getting to the hostages. Can you talk about Hamas's responsibility that's somewhat gets lost in the conversation?
Hamas certainly does have a responsibility to accept that they have taken hostages. That that's also a violation of many laws for them to do that. Their treatment of them, there's been many cases of that being horrific and in opposition of international criminal law also. And certainly Hamas could potentially release the hostages, and that could see an easing of tensions in the region. But there's also no guarantee of that. We are now in a conflict situation between Hamas and the IDF. If Hamas gave up all of the hostages, it would be very doubtful that Israel would then simply say to Hamas that they can continue to exist in Gaza. Now, unfortunately, after a horrific attack in October by Hamas, their main bargaining chip are these hostages. And the longer this conflict goes on, the more power and strength that they're going to have from having those hostages still in the country. If they give them up, they have nothing to negotiate with, which will in turn lead to even less aid getting through to the civilian population of Gaza. Now, bear in mind that this medicine is making its way to the Israeli hostages, which is very much needed. But on the back of that is the only reason, since the end of the ceasefire, the truce agreement that lasted very little time, it's the only time that Israel has really allowed mass aid to be delivered into the Gaza Strip. So unfortunately, it's a horrific situation on both sides here. But there is just no feasible way in this conflict situation that that Hamas could actually give up the hostages back to Israel and expect not to have a complete annihilation of them and also of the civilian population in Gaza.
Yeah, and you just answered my next question about the possibility of a ceasefire. I'm not even going to go there at this point. Mr. Nathan Paul Southern, thank you so much for your thorough analysis. And our correspondent, Jody Cohen. Jody, it's always lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for all your coverage. And I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Thank you to you, both of you. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about our next story, which is Pakistan and Iran. Well, diplomatic ties between the two countries are on the brink of collapse at this point after an Iranian airstrike inside Pakistan has raised a regional geopolitical storm. Pakistan pulled out its envoy from Iran, calling the strike unacceptable and illegal. Iran said that it targeted two bases linked to a militant group, Jaish al-Adl. Pakistan says 2 children were killed and 3 others injured in the strikes that hit a village near the border. Pakistan condemned what it called a blatant violation of its sovereignty. Tehran has linked the latest strikes to attacks close to the border last month. Security on either side of the border has been a long-running concern for both governments. Pakistan and Iran have fought armed separatist groups, including the Jaish al-Adl, for decades in the region. Iran's state media until now has not provided any specific details or evidence of the strikes. However, Iranian defense minister said that Iran is unwaveringly committed to safeguard its national interests and people. Ratcheting up temperatures, Pakistan has said that it reserves the right to respond. Pakistan recalled its ambassador from Iran, and the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, who is currently visiting Iran, may not return for the time being. All high-level visits between the two sides in the near future also stand suspended.
Pakistan reserves the right to respond to this illegal act, and the responsibility for the consequences will lie squarely with Iran. We have conveyed this message to the government of Iran. We have also informed them that Pakistan has decided to recall its ambassador from Iran, and that the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, who is currently visiting Iran, may not return for the time being.
A missile attack by Iran on Pakistan is near unprecedented. The strike on Tuesday hit Khusab's village in the vast southwestern Balochistan province. Iran and Pakistan share a 1,000-kilometer sparsely populated border. The attack comes hours after Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian met Pakistan's caretaker Prime Minister Anwar Kakar on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Worries grow of another flashpoint in the backdrop of the Russia, Ukraine, and Israel-Gaza conflicts and their offshoots. All right, for more on this, we were earlier joined by Ambassador Anil Trigu Nayat, Distinguished Fellow of VIF, the New Delhi-based think tank. He has served in the Indian missions in Bangladesh, Mongolia, USA, Libya, and Jordan as well. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Well, I think that the Pakistanis, even though they don't have any moral ground because they are known to be a haven of terrorism, but they may invoke this boogie of their sovereignty and all that, and they might try to raise it. But I believe that the foreign minister of Iran has met the Pakistani acting prime minister in Davos, and there must have been some understandings there. Now, if Iran allows or if they agree, possibly Pakistan, in order to save its skin at the government that they are doing something to take initiative, they could do something very minor in an open area just to show that they have also carried out such attacks. That is the one stretch that could happen. The other thing is that they might just take it easy and they can just protest strongly with Iran, and Iran might just go there. But the fact remains is that this group is very much there. There will be another occasion when these kind of activities will happen, because there are these minority groups who are fighting for their independence. They're fighting for betterment of the Sunni minority in Iran. So these are the kind of things that will continue to perpetuate all the time. And for that, only the Pakistani government, the onus lies on them. The fact remains that Pakistan has never bothered to take the responsibility for these terror groups, even though they are suffering from them now, TTP, Afghan, and others, whom they themselves have nurtured. So they have thousands of groups that they are nurturing all along and using it as a part of their state instrument of their foreign policy.
Thank you so much for staying with us and watching WION Live Broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani signing off for now. See you tomorrow.
Ayodhya comes alive as it counts down to the grand consecration ceremony. Prime Minister Modi to lead the inauguration of the Ram Temple. A story of faith, devotion, and dreams fulfilled.